They say betrayal always cuts the deepest when it comes from the people you trusted most. But what they don't tell you is how the scar it leaves will never fade, no matter how much you try to forget. Imagine standing at the very top of the mountain you've been climbing your whole life, the dream you've chased through storms, sweat, and sleepless nights finally within your grasp. Imagine signing the kind of deal that changes not only your future, but your children's futures. Now imagine, just hours later, lying unconscious in a hospital bed, broken and bleeding, because the same family you wanted to share that moment with, the ones whose approval you craved, were the ones who put you there. That is where my story begins. And before I take you into the chaos that followed, let me tell you this. Family isn't blood. Family is love. The family is showing up, not tearing down. Because the night I realized that truth, lying under the sterile lights of a hospital room will forever divide my life into before and after. My name is Elise Parker, and I had just turned 27 last month, a birthday I'd thought would mark the start of everything I ever dreamed of. It began with a contract I'd chased my whole life, a $6 million 3-year signing with the Phoenix Flames, one of the most talked about teams in the league. When I held that pen in my hand and pressed it to paper, flashes of every rainy court, every lonely practice session, every dismissive comment I'd brushed off over the years surged through me. It wasn't just a signature, it was victory. And yet, within days, what should have been my greatest triumph turned into my darkest nightmare. See, when you grow up in a family like mine, you learn very early where you stand in the hierarchy. From the outside, the Parkers looked polished, ordinary even. Suburban house in Providence, Rhode Island. A mother who prided herself on her homemaking. A father whose entire identity was wrapped in his business career. A sister who could do no wrong and a brother who never had to lift a finger. And then there was me, the middle child. The reminder that not every kid is going to fit into the mold their parents assign them. My older sister, Veronica, was the star. At 32, my parents still treated her like their miracle child. Piano. Recitals where she missed notes were met with wild applause. Sketches that belonged at the bottom of a wastebasket were framed like museum pieces. She was fed validation like candy, and every time they praised her mediocrity, it carved a hole inside me. Meanwhile, my basketball games, they were a nuisance. To my father, basketball was a hobby, not a profession. And when I dared to dream out loud, all I heard was, "You're wasting your time, Elise. Why can't you be more like your sister?" Then there was Caleb, my little brother, now 23. The golden baby. Shielded from responsibility, drowning in indulgence. He never needed to prove anything, because being the youngest was enough. Every allowance, every opportunity, cushioned his path while mine was paved with constant obstacles. And me? I was the ghost in the family portrait. Forgettable. Overlooked, except when they needed someone to shoulder blame. Veronica mastered that game early. Break a lamp. Elise did it. Botched. An art project? Elise lost it. The punishments fell on me every time, and by the time I was 10, I'd already learned the futility of defending myself. Veronica's cruelty sharpened with age. It evolved from childish tattling into calculated sabotage. She'd whisper comments about my weight when friends were around, or forget to pass along messages about family gatherings, then revel in my absence. "What? You didn't know?" "I thought everyone did," she'd say, feigning innocence. Her power came from the certainty that no matter what she did, our parents would shield her and condemn me. By 16, I decided I'd had enough. If I was ever going to matter, I'd have to carve out a life entirely on my own. I picked up shifts at the local supermarket, stacking shelves till midnight and waking up at dawn to practice basketball alone. I worked not for luxuries, but for survival, saving every dollar for my education because my parents' checkbook was already reserved for Veronica's art school ambitions. When she failed in New York and came crawling back home, They still treated her like a goddess who'd simply been misunderstood. And me? I hustled. I applied for scholarships, took side jobs, studied when I wasn't training. Basketball wasn't just a sport. It was salvation. Out there on the slick pavement of that cracked community court, ball in hand, I wasn't the forgotten middle child. I wasn't my sister's shadow. I was somebody. Each swoosh of the net was proof that I existed and could be more than they told me I could be. It was during one of those storm-soaked nights, when rain blurred the streetlights and my grip on the ball kept slipping, that everything shifted. A car pulled up, sputtering like it was held together by duct tape, and a woman watched me for what felt like an eternity. When she finally stepped out, I expected to be told to go home, that the court was closed, that I was crazy for practicing, in a storm. Instead, Coach Miranda Shaw looked at me, tilted her head slightly, and said words that etched themselves onto my soul. "You've got raw talent. But raw talent means nothing if you're not willing to break yourself for it. If you're willing, I can help you turn this into something real." Miranda wasn't like my parents, who measured value in compliance, or like Veronica, who lived off empty praise. She was iron, unforgiving, sharp, unafraid to push me harder than I thought I could endure. But beneath that steel was something even more dangerous: belief. She believed in me, fiercely and unapologetically. For the first time in my life, someone told me I was enough. Not because of who my family was, not because they pitied me, but because I'd earned it. Training under her wasn't just hard, it was brutal. She dismantled and rebuilt me, reshaping both my game and my mindset. And when college recruiters began filling the bleachers during my senior year, it was because of those nights, those drills, those moments when I could barely breathe, but refused to quit. My parents' reaction to my scholarship offer? Barely a shrug. "At least it saves us money," my mother had said flatly when I showed her the letter. 4 years of Division I ball, countless broken records, scouts whispering my name. And all they cared about was the cost. But I wasn't entirely alone. In my junior year of college, I spilled an entire sports drink on a stranger's law textbook during a mad dash for practice. I expected fury. Instead, I got a smile. His name was Daniel King, and he had this calm steadiness about him, like nothing could shake him off center. He came from a family so different from mine it felt unreal. Parents who showed up, siblings who cheered for each other, Sunday dinners full of laughter instead of subtle jabs. Daniel couldn't comprehend the dysfunction I described. And sometimes, neither could I. Families are supposed to build you up, Elise, not break you apart. That's what he'd told me over and over. And maybe he didn't understand my world, but he anchored me when it felt like I was drifting. By the time recruiters from professional teams came knocking, my name was circulating as one of the players to watch. The championship game sealed it, a buzzer-beating shot that made the entire stadium erupt. In that one instant, I existed outside of every shadow my family had ever cast. Elise Parker was everywhere. Highlight reels, interviews, rankings. The Phoenix Flames came calling, and the offer was life-changing. $6 million, plus performance bonuses that could add millions more. Signing that contract should have been pure joy. And it was, for about half a day. I walked out of that gleaming office building knowing I'd done the impossible. But as I looked down at the fresh ink of my signature, pride was tugged down by something darker. A hunger. I wanted my family to see me. Just once. Not as disposable, not as the problem child, as someone who had achieved the unthinkable. In my own quiet desperation, I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment that changed everything. I was wrong. The truth is, when you've spent your entire life starved of your parents' pride, you convince yourself that just one dazzling victory might be enough to finally win it. That was the trap I walked into the day I drove back to Providence with gifts in my trunk and $6 million worth of hope stuffed in my chest. I had called Daniel the night before, sitting in a Phoenix hotel room that smelled faintly of champagne and fresh ink from the contract signing. He'd just passed the bar exam, already a practicing sports attorney, which meant he was intimately aware of the magnitude of the deal I'd signed. His voice was cautious when I told him my plan. "Elise," he'd said, tight with concern, "you don't owe them this. Don't give them the power to ruin the single best moment of your life." But that gnawing hunger in me, the one that had been there since childhood, made me stubborn. "I just have to try," I whispered into the phone. "Even if it's just this once, maybe this will finally make them proud." He sighed hard into the receiver, and I could practically hear him smiling in that weary way he did when he knew he couldn't talk me out of something. "Then remember, no matter what happens in that house, I'm proud of you. Coach Miranda's proud of you. We see you. They don't get to take that away." Still, as I pulled into the cracked driveway of my childhood home, gifts carefully wrapped and stacked on the passenger seat, hope beat louder than fear. I parked, stared at the peeling paint on the garage door, and rehearsed the words in my head. $6 million, 3-year contract. The Phoenix Flames. We made it. I imagined the hugs, maybe even tears of pride. Imagined them finally understanding that the forgotten middle child had carved her name into the world. When I pushed open the front door, the smell of cinnamon potpourri hit me. Nostalgia tugged briefly, a reminder of snowy Christmases and birthday mornings when I was still young, enough to believe love existed equally in this family. The house looked exactly the same, down to the photographs lining the staircase wall. Veronica's high school graduation framed like a trophy, Caleb's Little League picture enlarged though he'd quit after 2 seasons, and a single picture of me at age 12, stuffed onto the end of the collage like a half-forgotten afterthought. "Hello?" I called, balancing the bags of gifts against my hip as I entered. My mother, Diane, appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. Her eyes flicked to the shopping bags suspiciously, then back to me, her face shifting between surprise and thinly veiled irritation. "Elise," she said coolly, "we weren't expecting you." I forced brightness into my voice. "I wanted to surprise you all. Is everyone here?" "Your father's watching the news in the den. Veronica and Caleb should be home any minute." Her gaze fell on the bags. Again. "What is all this?" "Just some things I picked up," I answered. "I have big news, Mom. I wanted to share it with everyone." Before she could respond, my father emerged, remote still in hand, brows furrowed at the interruption of his evening ritual. "Elise," he said simply, nodding once as though acknowledging a delivery man at the door. Moments later, the front door opened and in walked Veronica, designer sunglasses perched on her head despite the November chill. Caleb trailed behind, smelling faintly of cologne and cigarettes. Veronica froze when her eyes landed on me, her lips tightening before curling into a razor-thin smile. "Well," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "a family reunion. What's the occasion?" Heart pounding, I steadied my voice. "Can we all sit down for a minute? I want to tell you something." We gathered in the living room, the old sofa springs squeaking under the weight of my parents while Veronica reclined lazily in Dad's armchair as though it were her throne. Caleb, at least, gave me a polite smile when I began to speak. "I signed with the Phoenix Flames today," I said, my voice strong. 3 years. $6 million, with performance bonuses that could bring it closer to 8. For a moment, silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Dad's eyebrows twitched upward, the most emotion I'd seen from him in years. Mom's lips parted, then closed again. Caleb's eyes widened in genuine surprise, but it was Veronica's reaction that branded itself into me. Her knuckles turned white on the arm of the chair, and her jaw clenched so tightly I thought she might crack a tooth. 6 million, my father finally murmured, as though tasting the number. Yes, I said cautiously, opening one of and I wanted to celebrate with you all. I brought some things for everyone. I handed Dad the sleek watch he'd once drooled over in a shop window, Mom a leather handbag from her favorite brand, Caleb the latest gaming console, and Veronica a delicate chain necklace from a trending designer she'd admired months. Go. Dad studied the watch in silence. Mom stroked the handbag, her face unreadable. Caleb lit up, murmuring his thanks. But Veronica... She just stared at the jewelry box before snapping it shut with force that made me flinch. How nice of you, she said sharply. Throwing your money around. Must feel good to show off. Veronica, Mom said weakly, a reprimand with no intention. No, let's be honest, Veronica shot back, her voice rising. You come back here with your fancy contract and your flashy gifts, thinking you can buy your way into validation, as if a necklace makes up for the years you spent acting like you're better than the rest of us. I don't think I'm better, I protested, stung. I just wanted to share my happiness. I thought you'd be proud of me. Proud, she spat, standing now, eyes blazing. Do you know what it's like to hear every customer at the gallery ask if I'm related to that Elise Parker? Do you know what it's like to see their faces when they realize I'm just the woman behind the cash register, while my little sister is suddenly a national headline? You can't blame me for— Oh, but I do, she snapped, pointing, a finger at me like it was a weapon. Everything's always about you. Even when you weren't around, somehow you still managed to steal the narrative. Poor Elise, the forgotten child, the misunderstood underdog. Everyone cheering for you, while I'm left to rot here. To my horror, my father placed the watch back in its box and set it next to Veronica's necklace. His voice was cold, measured. She has a point. You should have thought about how this would look to the people who stayed when you came flaunting your money. My mother sighed heavily, clutching her bag to her chest like a shield. Happiness isn't about contracts and checks, Elise. You're chasing a dream that'll end the day you tear a ligament, while your sister has been doing real work, building a life here. Maybe try being a little less selfish. It was as though they had rehearsed it, every word scripted to slice clean into my heart. My chest tightened, air thin. I tried to salvage it, to redirect. I was actually looking at houses in Phoenix. Big ones. I thought it'd be nice to have one where we could all stay whenever. That was the wrong thing to say. What are you now? Veronica exploded, face red hot. Our benefactor? Throwing crumbs at the peasants who never mattered to you until now? Offering to buy us a house like we're your charity project? Stop twisting my words. My voice broke, louder than I'd intended. I just wanted you to be part of this, for once. Dad's eyes turned cold steel. Some of us have dignity, Elise. We don't need your pity. The walls seemed to close in as I stumbled to my feet. I didn't come here to fight. I wanted to share this moment with my family, but clearly I was wrong. My throat was burning as I headed toward the staircase, desperate for space. I need a minute alone, Veronica followed, fury rolling off her in waves. Of course. You do. Poor Elise, always the victim, so misunderstood, so mistreated. That's your brand, isn't it? Play the victim card every time you're not worshipped enough. I'm not playing anything, I snapped, gripping the banister. I just need— Alone? She shouted. Fine, be alone. And then her hands slammed into my shoulders. The world tilted violently. My head cracked against the edge of a step, pain exploding white-hot. Time slowed as I tumbled, my body thudding down the staircase in short, brutal bursts until I landed at the bottom, vision blurring. My last fragment of consciousness was the sound of my mother's voice, icy and sharp in the silence. She deserved it. Darkness swallowed me whole. The first thing I heard was a machine, a steady beep, too loud, too rhythmic, like it was part of a song I couldn't escape. Then came the smell, Antiseptic, sharp and sour, clinging to my throat. My eyelids felt like they were glued shut, every attempt to pry them open firing pain across my skull. For a terrible, fleeting second, I wasn't sure I wanted to wake up at all. But I did. The ceiling above me swam into focus, blinding fluorescent light carving daggers into my head. My throat burned with thirst when I tried to speak, producing only a dry, broken rasp. "She's awake," a woman's voice said gently. Quick footsteps followed. "Dr. Alvarez, get in here." A face leaned into my view. A woman in blue scrubs, brunette hair tied in a bun, brown eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time: concern. Her name tag read Julia, RN. "You're safe," she said softly, pressing a straw to my lips. Just small sips. The water was liquid salvation. I drank greedily until she pulled it away. "Where?" I croaked. "You're at Providence General," she explained. "You've been unconscious for almost 3 days." 3 days. The number crashed into me. 3 days of silence. 3 days where no one from my family had been at my side. Pain radiated through my chest as I tried to shift, the plastic brace around my neck stopping me cold. Panic clawed up my throat. "Stay still," Julia urged. "You've got spinal trauma, fractured ribs, a broken wrist, severe concussion. You're stable, but you can't move too much." Her words dulled into static as dread slammed into me. Spinal trauma. My heart stumbled. "Basketball," I whispered, half to myself. "Can I play again?" Dr. Alvarez entered then, tall and tired-looking, with kind lines etched into the corners of his eyes. He carried a clipboard stacked with my vitals. When I asked again, more forcefully, if I could ever play, the pause in his expression told me everything. The answer I wasn't ready to hear. "It's too early to tell," he said carefully. "Your surgery is not scheduled yet. Rehabilitation will be long. Professional sports may not be realistic after this kind of injury. But let's focus on recovery for now. One step at a time." My stomach dropped, my chest caving with the weight of dreams dangling by a thread. Basketball was my lifeline, my identity. Without it, who was I? But another thought pounded louder beneath the pain and the despair. This wasn't an accident. Julia met my eyes as if reading my thoughts. "Do you remember what happened?" she asked softly. The images surged back. Veronica's hands on my shoulders, the flash of hatred in her face, the sickening fall, and my mother's cruel voice. She deserved it. "Yes," I croaked, my voice cracked with fury. "My sister pushed me." Julia's lips tightened ever so slightly, but the look in her eyes said she believed me. "Rest. Protect your energy. You'll need it." Hours blurred like smeared colors. Nurses checked vitals. Dr. Alvarez came and went, but something gnawed at me, hollow and jagged. They kept asking whether they should contact my family. Every time I answered the same. "They know," I whispered bitterly. They watched, and still, no one from that house had appeared. Not to apologize, not to ask, not even to confirm I was alive. By the second evening, Julia returned with a guilty expression. She hesitated before speaking, then leaned close like she was confessing a secret. "I don't usually share this, but you should know," she said quietly. "Your family came in the night you were admitted, but they didn't ask about your condition. They only wanted your personal effects, your wallet, your keys, your phone. Hospital policy required us to release them since they were listed as family." She touched my arm lightly, her voice thick. "I'm sorry." The words tore through me like claws. They hadn't come to see me. They'd come to strip me. Even broken on a hospital bed, they found a way to take more. That night, loneliness nearly drowned me. For the first time since I was a child, I cried without holding back. Heavy, hot tears for the family who had hated me enough to leave me for dead. I was so lost in grief that I didn't hear the door open until I felt a warm hand slide into mine. Elise! I gasped at his voice, lifting my head. Daniel stood at the doorway, his suit rumpled, his usually steady composure replaced with frantic relief. His eyes widened as they ran over the bandages, the wires, the brace tethering me to the bed. Oh my God. He crossed the room in 3 strides, falling to his knees beside the bed. His hand wrapped mine so tightly it hurt, but it was a pain that grounded me. I've been calling you for days. I thought, Elise, I thought you were gone. The dam inside me broke. Between sobs, I told him everything. The contract, the gifts, Veronica's fury, the shove, the betrayal that echoed deeper than shattered bones. He listened silently, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white against my hand. By the time I stammered through the last word, tears streaking down my face, his entire body was trembling with contained rage. This wasn't an accident, he said finally, voice calm but shaking with fury. They assaulted you. Then they stole from you. Elise, this is criminal. We're pressing charges. I swear I am not letting them get away with this. His words ignited a spark inside me. For the first time since I woke, I felt something other than despair. Not hope. Rage. Pure, hot, electric rage. They took my phone. I realized suddenly, memory clicking. They've been trying to reach my accounts, haven't they? Daniel's eyes darkened. That explains it. Your debit cards are drained, Elise. I checked with your bank before I found you. Hundreds of transactions in the last 48 hours. They're burning through everything. Fraud and theft on top of attempted murder. The hospital room tilted. Nausea punched me in the gut. I wasn't just broken. They were picking me clean while I lay here, helpless. I grabbed Daniel's hand. Tighter. Freeze everything, I whispered. Accounts, cards. Stop them before there's nothing left. Already on it, he replied, pulling his laptop from his bag and opening it on the visitor's chair. His hands flew across the keyboard, precise, practiced. Even in his rage, he was relentless, clinical. There was reassurance in that. Where I was vulnerable, Daniel cut sharp. By morning, reinforcements arrived. Not the family that bore my blood, but the family I had chosen. Coach Miranda walked through the door with fire in her stride, her presence filling the room like steel. She took one look at me, at the brace, the bruises, the wires, and her jaw tightened. Those people are not your family, she said, arms crossed firmly. Family doesn't throw you down the stairs. Family doesn't rob you while you're unconscious. You're done with them. They don't exist anymore. For once, I had no strength to argue. Deep down, I knew she was right, but forgiving that truth, accepting it, that was another matter. Later that day, Detective Jared Foster walked in, clipboard in hand, badge flashing. He was stocky, graying at the edges, with an expression that suggested he'd seen every kind of cruelty but refused to let it harden him completely. He sat at my bedside, voice low but steady. Miss Parker, I need to confirm your statement. You're saying your sister deliberately shoved you down the stairs, that your parents refused aid, and afterward, they stole your property and money? I swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. Yes. And my brother was there. Caleb. He saw everything. His expression didn't change, but his pen pressed harder to paper. And you believe there's evidence? Daniel slid across the table a phone, bagged by the hospital staff. There is. Elise's phone automatically activated her voice memo app during the fight. It recorded everything. The argument, the shove, her fall, and most importantly, her mother's voice saying, she deserved it. Then her father, get her wallet and keys. Detective Foster's brows lifted. Then he nodded firmly. That's not just evidence. That's your case. For the first time, I saw not just rage and loss in my reflection on the blank TV screen across from me. I saw determination. They had pushed me down the stairs. They had stolen every dollar they could find. They had left me for dead. And now, with Daniel, Miranda, and the law on my side, I was pushing back. When Detective Jared Foster left my hospital room that first night, promising to pull the threads until the whole sweater unraveled, I felt something I hadn't felt since my fall. Control. Not in my body, which still screamed with every attempt to move, but in the course of what came next. Because if there was one thing my family had underestimated all my life, it was my ability to fight back. I wasn't the weak one. I wasn't the forgotten one, and I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Detective Foster returned the very next morning, notebook in hand, dark coffee steaming from the styrofoam cup he carried. "We pulled your bank records," he said without preamble. "Nearly 80,000 in unauthorized withdrawals across your accounts in less than 72 hours. Withdrawal slips signed in your mother's handwriting. Some charges showing your father's credit card linked to your accounts. That alone is enough to charge theft and fraud." He paused, eyeing me carefully. "But the bigger charge, the one for attempted murder, that depends on two things: your statement and corroborating evidence." Daniel, seated beside me with his laptop perpetually glowing, cut in before I could speak. "We have both. Her brother Caleb was a witness, and we have the voice recording." Foster nodded slowly. "We're processing the audio now, but if it's as clear as you say, that will be more than enough. Still, I'll be honest with you. Caleb's testimony is crucial. If he backs you up, the DA will have the confidence to push for an aggressive prosecution." I tightened my jaw. Caleb, timid, spoiled, perpetually in Veronica's shadow, had watched me fall, had watched me bleed. Would he stand with me now? Or would he melt back into their camp, terrified of facing the wrath of Veronica and my parents? My chest tightened with equal parts anger and dread. By the following afternoon, the detective had more news. "We interviewed your neighbors. Mrs. Duffy across the street mentioned her security camera pointed toward your front steps. We've pulled the footage. You can see your sister confronting you through the window before the fall, her storming after you, and then your body tumbling down the stairs. It's not perfect, but paired with audio, it's damning." Hearing those words brought a poisonous wave of emotions. Relief, because finally the truth had something tangible behind it. But also grief, deep and suffocating, because I had spent years begging the universe for my parents to see me. And now the world was about to see them for what they really were. That evening, as the news broke that 3 members of the Parker family were under active investigation for assault and fraud, I lay in bed with my body aching. But for the first time, I wasn't drowning alone. Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, hand gripping mine. Coach Miranda paced like a caged tiger, muttering about how the Phoenix Flames management was already circling, waiting to hear if their $6 million investment had just gone up in smoke. "Elise, they're rattled," Miranda said finally, spinning on her heel. "Sports media outlets are already whispering about the fall, your injury, rumors of paralysis. The Flames want answers. They're deciding if your contract is voidable." My stomach clenched, sweat dripping at my temples. "I can't lose it," I whispered hoarsely. "Not like this." "You might," Miranda answered bluntly. Then she softened. "But let's not forget. You're more than just a player. If it comes to it, we pivot. You're not going to disappear, Elise. Not after everything you've been through. I'll make sure of that." It struck me then how strange and broken my life had become. In a hospital bed, ribs shattered, my spine uncertain, more worried about a team contract than my own survival. But when survival has been your only language since childhood, what else can you do but cling to the lifelines you worked so hard to build? Then it happened, the knock at the door. It was soft at first, then firmer. Julia, my nurse, cracked it open cautiously, her expression tight. "I need to let you know," she said carefully. "Your family is here, all of them. They're demanding to see you. Security has them in the lobby, but things could escalate." The beeping on my heart monitor spiked immediately, betraying the terror coiled inside me. My injuries ached at the thought of them breathing the same air. These people, the ones who let me bleed, who stole from me, who resented me to the point of violence, dared to show their faces now. Daniel was already rising, his phone in hand. "They have no legal right to be here." Detective Foster warned them. "I'll call him right now. Elise, you're safe. I won't let them in." But still, I heard them. Their voices filtered down the hall, rising in familiar waves like a storm I'd lived my entire life bracing for. My father's cold authority, my mother's shrill insistence, Veronica's venom. "She's our daughter. You can't keep us from her." Robin is confused from the medication. She doesn't know what she's saying. "I never pushed her." And then, the shuffle of heavier footsteps. A new voice, calm but commanding. "Kenneth, Diane, Veronica Parker. I'm Detective Foster, Providence PD. You're aware of the restraining order. Step away from that door. Now?" The silence that fell outside the door was louder than their shouting. I imagined their faces, pinched with rage as Foster's voice dropped colder than ice. "You leave voluntarily or you leave in cuffs. 10 seconds to decide." Footsteps retreated. Low muttering faded. Moments later, Foster himself entered my room, trailed by a uniformed officer standing guard at the door. "Miss Parker," he said, softer now. "They've been escorted out. They won't bother you here again. And I wanted to tell you in person. The DA is moving forward. Formal charges will be filed within the week. Aggravated assault for Veronica, multiple counts of theft and fraud for your parents." I nodded, though my hands trembled in my lap. The vindication landed heavy on my chest, but it didn't fill the hole. Because beneath the fire, beneath the rage, was the thick sludge of grief. The realization that the people I was supposed to call family had declared themselves my enemies. After Foster left, I stared at the ceiling, fear curling around me again. "Daniel," I whispered, "it never ends, does it? They'll always be my blood. How do I ever get rid of them?" "You replace them," he said simply, his voice hard as stone. Then he took my hand, softer now. "You build something better, with people who love you the way you should have been loved all along. People like Coach Miranda. People like me." For the first time since I'd woken in that hospital bed, I let myself imagine it. A future not chained to the cruelty of my past, but tethered to something new, something chosen. And yet, one thought thrummed hotter than hope, deeper than grief. If they thought they could break me, they hadn't met the version of Elise Parker who was ready to wage war. The day of the arraignment began with pain. Not the kind that pulsed through my ribs when I tried to sit up, or the sharp shock that shot across my spine every time I shifted in bed. No, this pain was heavier, deeper, a pressure on my chest that had nothing to do with broken bones. It was the ache of knowing that by the end of the day, I would sit face to face with the people who had left me for dead, and hear them plead their innocence as though my suffering were nothing but a misunderstanding. Daniel wheeled me into the courthouse, his steady hands gripping the chair as though guiding me through enemy territory. Reporters swarmed like vultures outside, cameras flashing, microphones shoved forward. Professional athlete betrayed by family. The headline alone was too intoxicating for the media to resist. I could hear their questions ricocheting in the air. "Elise, did your sister really push you? Elise, do you regret going home that night? Elise, are you still under contract with the Phoenix Flames?" The courthouse steps glistened from the drizzle that had started that morning, faint raindrops dotting my hospital blanket. My heart pounded in my ears, But instead of ducking away, I lifted my chin. For the first time since the fall, I wanted the world to look at me, to see me, not as a victim, not as a pity story, but as someone who had survived the darkest betrayal anyone could imagine. Daniel guided me through the crush as cameras snapped furiously. Inside, the courthouse hummed with hushed voices, the tension in the air thick enough to choke on. Coach Miranda had flown in from Phoenix to sit firmly behind me, her presence as grounding as bedrock. The assistant district attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Laura Quinn, greeted us with a firm handshake. "They'll try to paint this as an accident," she warned. "They'll say it was a family fight gone too far. They'll claim the withdrawals from your accounts were misunderstandings. But we have evidence, and today the judge will see it for what it is." I nodded, though my stomach churned. I wasn't afraid of the evidence failing. I was afraid of what it would do to me to hear their voices again, to feel their eyes on me in front of strangers. The courtroom doors creaked open and whispers rippled through the gallery. Veronica entered first, dressed in a conservative gray dress, hair slicked back, her expression brittle but defiant. She walked as if she was still the star of every room she entered, though her wrists were bound in cuffs hidden under her coat. Behind her came my parents. My father, usually full of iron authority, looked thinner, angrier. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue already dampened, ready to play the role of tragic, misunderstood mother for the cameras. When their eyes scanned the room and landed on me in my wheelchair, time froze. My father's jaw stiffened, his glare icy. My mother broke the gaze instantly, shame or cowardice dripping from the way she turned away. And Veronica? She stared at me head-on, not with guilt, not with fear, but with a mixture of calculated defiance and something else. Panic, clawing beneath the surface. "All rise." The courtroom stood as the judge entered, robes flowing, gavel ready. The proceedings began in cold, methodical steps. Charges read aloud, pleas entered. For Veronica, aggravated assault. She pleaded not guilty. For my father, conspiracy, fraud, theft by deception, not guilty. For my mother, theft, fraud, criminal negligence, not guilty. The words cut deeper than knives. Not guilty, as if the dark bruises littering my body had simply sprouted on their own. As if the audio recording on my phone capturing my mother's voice, she deserved it, were nothing but a hallucination. Then, the evidence came forward. Laura. Quinn rose steadily, projecting her voice with the clarity of a woman who had shredded defendants far worse than mine. "Your Honor, the state submits Exhibit A, a voice recording taken directly from the victim's phone on the night of the assault. This evidence is time-stamped and verified as originating from Miss Parker's device." The audio echoed through the courtroom, muffled but unmistakable. Veronica's voice rose in rage, my cries, the thuds as my body hit each step, and then those chilling words. She deserved it. The courtroom gasped collectively. My mother covered her face with her tissue, though she didn't cry when those words first left her lips. My father's hands clenched into fists on the table. "And then," Laura continued, her voice steely, "we hear Kenneth Parker say, 'Get her wallet and phone.' This is not the reaction of parents witnessing an accident. This is intent. This is premeditation. This is exploitation of their own daughter lying broken on their floor." The silence that followed was thunderous. The defense attorneys scrambled, throwing out desperate arguments. It was a family argument that spiraled out of control. Veronica hadn't meant to push me. It was reflex. My parents only collected my belongings to keep them safe. They weren't thieves. They were concerned caregivers misunderstood in the heat of the moment. But each word felt flimsy, empty against the avalanche of evidence. Bank records, neighbor camera footage, hospital, Records that proved my family hadn't even asked whether I was alive on the night of my admission. Every detail a nail in the coffin of their facade. And then, just when my chest felt like it couldn't bear the pressure, when I thought the weight of their presence might suffocate me, I saw him. Charles Livingston, president of the Phoenix. Flames slipped quietly into a back bench, his silver hair unmistakable, his brow set in seriousness. His presence was like a lifeline, a reminder that even if I couldn't return to the court yet, my story wasn't over. The flames hadn't abandoned me. Not yet. When the arguments concluded, the judge lowered his gaze over the courtroom, his voice sharp as steel. Given the overwhelming evidence and the defendant's recent violation attempting to force entry into the victim's hospital room, bail is denied. All three will remain in custody until trial. The sound of the gavel came down like thunder. For the first time, I exhaled. As the bailiffs moved to escort Veronica and my parents out of the courtroom, my father glanced back, his face hard as stone. My mother stumbled, pale as the realization of their reality set in. But it was Veronica's eyes that clung to me, full of defiance wrapped around a thin thread of fear. For a moment, I thought I saw it, faint and flickering, regret. Not for the crime, not for the betrayal, but for the fact that she got caught. When they disappeared through the side door, Daniel leaned close and touched my shoulder. "It's over," he whispered, but I shook my head. "No, this is just the beginning." Because while the courtroom delivered one kind of justice, the road ahead would demand another. My career still hung in the balance, my injuries still chained me to recovery, and the world was still watching, waiting to see whether Elise Parker would rise again or fade into the tragic obscurity of a headline. But as I wheeled toward the courthouse exit, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward once more, I lifted my chin just a fraction higher than before. I had already decided I would rise. The weeks after the arraignment were a blur of pain, press, and paperwork. Pain because my body still hadn't forgiven me for being thrown down those stairs. My ribs healed slowly, every cough or laugh tearing like rusted metal inside my chest. My spine, the most terrifying injury, remained fragile. I lived strapped, in braces, dependent on nurses and therapists to help me shuffle from bed to chair. Recovery felt endless, like walking in place while the world moved ahead without me. The press never stopped circling, no matter how much I tried to block them. Headlines plastered across morning shows and sports broadcasts painted me either as a tragic figure betrayed by her family or as a rising star whose career was now at risk. I learned fast that pity sold just as well as glory. Paparazzi tried to hound the hospital for photos, hungry for shots of me in my wheelchair, for proof that the fall had robbed me of everything. And then the paperwork. Legal filings, court schedules, statements drafted carefully by Daniel to protect me. Bank forms frozen and reopened. Dozens of creditors to argue with after charges popped up I had never made. Rings purchased in Manhattan, expensive wine cases shipped under my name. All of it clawed through by Daniel until the fraud was nailed tight onto my parents' record. But in between the chaos, one thing lingered louder than all: the uncertainty of my career. The Phoenix Flames had been silent since the arraignment. Too silent. Rumors swirled in the media about the team reevaluating my contract. Some suggested I'd be released to free up the salary cap. Others speculated that the organization might support me for PR optics, but only if I recovered fast enough to get back on the court. Every whisper scalded, feeding the fire of insecurity I had never fully shaken, even after my championship-winning shot. Coach Miranda became my shield during those weeks. Fierce and protective, she barged into my hospital room more often than medical staff, carrying scouting reports and game clips like medicine. "You're still Elise Parker," she snapped. One afternoon, as I sat in my chair, breathing shallowly through pain while physical therapists guided me through basic stretches, your skill doesn't vanish because you're in a brace. And trust me, the flames know that. If they don't, I'll remind them until they remember. I wanted desperately to believe her. But late at night, when silence filled the room and the machines hummed steadily, doubt crept like shadows up my IV lines. Who was I without basketball? Without 6 million reasons to prove my family wrong? Had they finally stolen the one thing I couldn't fight to get back? Recovery itself was humiliation in stages. From being spoon-fed meals because my wrist couldn't handle weight, to assisted bathroom trips that stripped me of every shred of dignity. My days were scheduled around physical therapy, teaching my stiff legs to bear weight again, coaxing my spine to trust me 1 inch at a time. Each exercise was agony, a burning, stretching pain that made me gasp, drenched in sweat, and yet I clung to it like oxygen. Because every movement, every grimace, every tiny improvement meant I wasn't finished. Then came the moment that nearly broke me. 3 weeks after the arraignment, I tried taking my first steps with a walker. The therapist cheered softly around me, Daniel's eyes shining with hope as he watched. But when I struggled forward, my left leg buckled, sending pain screaming through my spine. I crumpled, only held upright by 2 trainers supporting me. Tears of rage and despair poured hot and ugly as I collapsed back into the chair. "I can't do this," I muttered, biting down against sobs. "It's over. Basketball's gone. They destroyed it." Daniel knelt in front of me, steady as ever. "Listen to me. You've been counted out your whole life, and every single time you've proved them wrong. This isn't any different. You're not done, Elise, not by a long shot." But it wasn't until a week later, when Charles Livingston himself appeared, in my hospital room, that a beam of unexpected light cut through the darkness. "Elise," he said, stepping in with the quiet authority only someone like him could carry. He looked exactly as he had the day I signed my contract. Sharp suit, silver hair, a presence that could silence a room without speaking. "I wanted to come to you face to face. The organization stands with you." My breath caught in my throat. "Stand with me how? You've been through something unimaginable. We don't turn our backs on our players when they're at their hardest point," he said firmly. "That $6 million contract, we're not voiding it. Yes, your injuries change things, but we're prepared to offer you a modified role. While you recover, we'll bring you into the organization as an assistant development coach. Salary, benefits, everything stays. And when you're medically cleared, the door back onto the court remains open." The words rang like salvation. Too good, too much. Tears blurred my vision as I tried to respond. "You're serious?" Livingston leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You've already proven yourself, on the court and in your perseverance. This team doesn't just want players, it wants fighters. And you, Elise, are exactly that." When he left, I broke down completely. Miranda squeezed my shoulder, her voice rough with pride. "See? They see you. They value you. Something your birth family never learned to do. Now let's make sure you prove them right." From that day onward, therapy felt different. Still brutal, still endless, but no longer meaningless. With every step, every painful stretch, I wasn't just fighting for my body. I was fighting for the future Livingston had handed me, for the version of myself that had crawled out of betrayal and carved a place on the court, wheelchair or not. Meanwhile, the trial of my family loomed closer. Media coverage intensified. Talk shows dissected the psychology of siblings, debated the envy that drove Veronica, questioned how parents could orchestrate theft against their own child. My name trended constantly, sometimes with cruel speculation. She probably exaggerated. The fall. Athletes make drama for clout. But each time, Daniel handled press statements with lawyer precision, Miranda marched me through drills, and the support around me whispered louder than the hate. And one afternoon, as I balanced carefully between parallel bars in therapy, Caleb walked in. My chest tightened at the sight of him, his pale, nervous face, the same boy who had watched me fall and said nothing. "Elise," he whispered, eyes wet. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I can't stay quiet anymore. I want to testify. I want to tell the truth." The room went still. My arms trembled against the bars, but something steadied inside me. This wasn't an absolution, but it was the first time a blood relative had chosen me over them. "I'm not ready to forgive you," I told him, voice firm, "but maybe I'm ready to hear you out." The first time I saw Caleb walk into the witness preparation room, shoulders hunched, hair slightly unkempt, hands shoved deep into his hoodie pockets, he didn't look like the younger brother who had once followed me around with wide-eyed admiration when we were kids. He looked like a boy who had spent years learning to disappear, and now, forced into the light, didn't quite know how to exist. "Elise," he mumbled, his voice low, uncertain. "I told Detective Foster I'd testify, if you want me to." His words carried weight. This was the same boy who had watched as his sister was hurled down the stairs and crumpled at the bottom, and said nothing. The same boy who, in the hours that followed, had allowed our parents and Veronica to treat me like debris while they scavenged my possessions. Yet here he was, trembling but stepping into the very storm he'd once run from. "I don't forgive you," I said flatly, a wheelchair angled in front of me like iron armor. His gaze dropped to the floor, shame flickering across his expression. "But if you're telling the truth, I won't stop you. Just understand something, Caleb. Being a witness takes guts. You don't get to half do this. You go all the way, or you go home." Slowly, he nodded. "I'll go all the way." The days leading up to trial were a blur of preparation. Laura Quinn, the ADA, pulled me into long sessions in which she explained what to expect. "The defense is going to come for you, Elise. They'll question your memory, suggesting you're exaggerating. They might even try to frame this as an accident you're exploiting for financial gain. You need to be ready." I nodded, though the thought of hearing those lies spewed in open court made my stomach churn. But I reminded myself that this wasn't just about surviving another round of verbal cruelty from my family. It was about reclaiming my story. News crews camped outside the courthouse on day one. Headlines blared, "Athlete versus Bloodline, Betrayal." Trial of the year. The steps swarmed with flashing cameras, anchors dissecting every detail of the case. It seemed everyone in America had an opinion about my family, about me, despite not knowing half of what we had lived through. Inside the courtroom, however, all noise condensed into suffocating silence. There, I sat in my wheelchair at the front, Daniel at my side, Miranda just behind me, her presence like an immovable force. Caleb sat nervously outside in a waiting room, while across the aisle, Veronica and my parents filled the defense table. They looked smaller than I remembered, not weaker, because there was still venom in their eyes, but smaller, stripped of the aura of control they had once wielded over me. Veronica kept her chin tilted high, but there was a jittery twitch in her jaw that betrayed the panic under her facade. My mother dabbed at invisible tears with a tissue, still clinging to her performance. My father's eyes were steel, unflinching, though when they flicked toward the back of the room where Charles Livingston sat, assessing, even he flinched. The trial began with a whirl of statements and presentations. Laura Quinn's voice cut, sharp and deliberate as she laid out the facts. "This is not a case of a tragic family argument. This is a case of premeditated jealousy, violence, and theft. The victim here, Elise Parker, is a nationally recognized athlete whose only mistake was returning to her parents' home to share good news. For that, she was assaulted by her own sister, neglected by her own parents, and stolen while unconscious in the hospital. Every shred of evidence will show this act for what it is, an attack born of greed and resentment. The defense countered quickly. Their attorney tried to frame it as an unfortunate accident. Yes, voices were raised. Yes, emotions boiled over. But Miss Roberts, Veronica, did not intend to inflict lasting injury on her sister. The push was reflexive. A tragic moment in a heated argument exaggerated by a family already fractured. And the belongings they took? Routine caregiving, misunderstood in hindsight. It was almost laughable, if not for the fact that they were describing my broken spine like it was a misunderstanding. Then the evidence poured in. The audio from... My phone played aloud, voices reverberating through the courtroom. Veronica's screams, my father's cold command. She deserved it. My mother's venom echoed across the silence, and I could see jurors shift uncomfortably in their chairs. Photos of my injuries projected onto screens. Bank statements aligned in neat charts, showing funds siphoned in the days after. Security. Footage from the neighbor's camera flickering grainy images of Veronica storming after me before I fell. Each piece was another stone building the wall of truth between their arguments and reality. Then came the witnesses. When Caleb's name was called, my breath caught. He walked slowly to the stand, wringing his hands, eyes flicking nervously across the room until they landed on me. For a brief second, he seemed to draw strength, his back straightening slightly before he began. I saw it, he said clearly, voice trembling but firming with each word. I saw Veronica push Elise. It wasn't an accident. She meant it. She was angry. She screamed at her, shoved her with both hands. And when Elise fell, my parents didn't call for help. They said she deserved it. They told me not to say anything. They told me we had to focus on the bigger picture. His voice cracked at the end, tears spilling down his face. Veronica leapt from her seat as though she'd been stung. You liar! She shouted, pointing at him. Coward! You're just jealous, too. You're turning on your own family. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Miss Roberts, sit down. But the damage had been done. In that moment, the facade cracked. The jurors saw what I had lived with for years. The rage, the entitlement, the cruelty that turned every room toxic. When it was my turn to testify, I wheeled to the stand, my hands gripping the rim so tightly they ached. My voice trembled at first, but steadied as I spoke. I went back to that house hoping they'd be proud of me. Hoping, even after years of indifference, that this achievement might finally mean something to them. I brought gifts. I brought news. I brought my heart exposed, begging for acceptance. My voice broke, but I pushed through. And for that, my sister pushed me down the stairs. My parents watched me fall and left me there. They took my things, my money, my security. And at no time, not once, did they choose me. They only chose themselves, as they always have. But this time, it nearly killed me. By the time I finished, silence swept the courtroom like a tide. When our side rested, the defense lawyers tried every trick, targeting Caleb's hesitation, suggesting my foggy memory from the concussion rendered me unreliable. But no amount of twisting could erase the cold clarity of the audio recording, the bank theft, the eyewitness corroboration. The trial stretched for days, every hour chipping away at the armor I had built around myself. Yet, every time Veronica sneered across the courtroom, every time my father glared, every time my mother put on her mask of grief for the jury, I found myself sitting taller. This was no longer a fight for their approval. This was a declaration. When closing arguments ended, I wheeled out of that courtroom, knowing something with certainty. No matter the verdict, no matter what penalty the law handed down, this chapter of my life with them was finished. I had survived. And survival wasn't just escaping death, it was reclaiming life. The morning the verdict came down, the The courtroom felt like it was holding its own breath. The tension was suffocating, thick, enough to coat the back of my throat. Reporters filled the gallery once more, pens poised, cameras prepared to flash the moment the gavel fell. My wheelchair creaked softly as Daniel adjusted it into place beside him. Coach Miranda sat behind me, her hand resting on the back of the chair in a quiet show of strength. Across the aisle, my family looked like statues carved from bitterness. My father's face might as well have been granite, rigid, stoic, eyes narrowed like a man determined not to bow to shame. My mother clutched her damp handkerchief like a lifeline, her eyes shifting anywhere but toward me. And Veronica, always, the center of their orbit, sat with her chin jutting out, jaw tight, defiance radiating from every angle of her body, even as her ankles shackled together beneath the defense table told a different story. "All rise," the bailiff commanded. The judge entered, robes billowing, his presence commanding silence. The jury filed in after him, their faces a puzzle of expressions I couldn't quite read. Weariness, focus, maybe even sympathy. My heart banged so hard against my ribs I feared it might break them all over again. When the foreperson rose to deliver the verdict, the air seemed to solidify around us. On the charge of aggravated assault against the defendant, Veronica Roberts, the pause stretched like cruel theater. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty." The word dropped like a hammer. My breath shuddered out as a wave of relief and grief collided in my chest. Veronica's hand shot out to grip the table, shoulders stiffening, but her expression didn't crack. She stared forward, eyes glassy but unreadable. On the charges of theft, fraud, and conspiracy against the defendants Kenneth and Diane Parker. Another pause. "We, the jury, find the defendants guilty on all counts." The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The world inside the courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbling, whispers hissing, emotion crashing like tidewater. I couldn't hear it all, not clearly. All I heard was the word itself, echoing over and over. Guilty. I hadn't realized how much of myself had been braced for disappointment, for the possibility that once again my family would escape accountability, that somehow their manipulation and charm might bend the truth like it always had in our household dynamics. But not this time. For once, the truth hadn't bent. It had held. The sentencing came a week later. By then, my body ached less, but my spirit trembled more. I had dreamt of this moment for so long. Not justice by courts, but simply the acknowledgement that what they had done mattered, that it wasn't all in my head. And yet, sitting in that same sterile courtroom, the weight of what was about to happen smothered me. Veronica's sentence came first. 5 years in state prison for aggravated assault with parole possible after 3. Her expression stayed locked. She nodded once as though she had expected nothing less. For the first time, though, something flickered in her eyes when she glanced at me, something that resembled not hatred, not defiance, but genuine defeat. My parents received 3 years each for theft, fraud, and negligence, plus restitution for the stolen funds. When the judge delivered the order, my mother collapsed into shallow sobs, dabbing at her cheeks theatrically while my father sat stiff, eyes fixed forward, as if he were already rehearsing his cold dignity for the prison yard. As bailiffs led them away, I half expected one last look, one glance seeking mercy, one broken apology whispered in desperation. Instead, my father never looked back. My mother turned once, her eyes like a storm of accusation as though I had committed the crime of telling the truth. And Veronica's gaze lingered just long enough for me to feel the echo of years of rivalry and bitterness condensed into one moment before she too was gone. And then, just like that, it was over. The trial that had consumed months of my recovery, the circus of headlines, the storm of betrayal, all distilled into court documents and prison sentences. Justice had been served. At least, that was the official language. But leaving the courthouse into crisp autumn air, my body achingly upright. In my chair, I realized something heavy pressed down on me still. Justice did not feel like victory. It felt like loss sealed in a legal envelope. Because while my family was behind bars, no verdict could give me back what I had wanted from them all my life. Not money, not praise, not gifts. Love, care, the belief that I had mattered. Courts don't issue judgments that can rewrite childhood or erase years of craving validation from people who never had the capacity to give it. That night, sitting by my hospital window, city lights speckled in the distance, I asked Daniel a question I had barely dared to voice. "Do you think it's wrong?" I whispered, voice shaky. "That I don't feel victorious? That I feel sadder somehow?" Daniel set down the legal pad he'd been scribbling on. He leaned forward, his hand covering mine gently. "No, Elise. It's not wrong. Justice isn't joy. Justice is acceptance. You didn't get the family you deserved, and no verdict will ever change that." His dark eyes softened. "But you have something else. You have me. You have Miranda. You have the team. You're building something stronger. That's the victory." His words settled like a seed inside me. Not immediately blossoming, not instantly soothing, but planting the idea that maybe my future could be built not on what I had lost, but on what I was still creating. By then, the Flames had officially announced my new role. Charles Livingston himself held the press conference, stating firmly that the team believed in my resilience, my insight, and my future as both a player and mentor. They were honoring the full contract, assigning me as an assistant player development coach during recovery with the potential for playing time if my health allowed. The sports media buzzed over it. Some analysts praised the Flames' loyalty. Others dismissed it as a PR move. A few pundits sneered that I was now charity on the roster. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't care what any of them thought. I had a seat at the table. I had a role, a purpose. Meanwhile, physical therapy transformed into my battlefield. Each morning became combat, parallel bars lined with sweat, resistance bands pulling fire through muscles, therapists urging me to push past the tremors. Some days I sobbed through the sessions. Other days I finished trembling but proud. Slowly, incredibly, I began to regain movement. From chair to walker, from walker to crutches, then, miraculously, to shaky, unaided steps. One evening, after a grueling session, Miranda clasped my shoulder with her calloused coach's hand. "The body remembers," she said firmly, "and so does the heart. You're still an athlete. Elise, don't ever forget that." Those words rooted deep, because they reminded me that even if professional basketball returned to me in body alone, it had never left me in spirit. But perhaps the most surprising turn came months later when a letter arrived from Caleb. His script was uneven, nervous. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I stood by and watched when I should have screamed. I did nothing. And that's almost worse than what they did. But I need you to know. I'm not them anymore. I'm in therapy now. I've cut ties. I want to be better. Not because prison scared me, but because what happened to you broke me too. I don't expect you'll ever let me close again. But I'm sorry, Elise. Truly." I read it 3 times over, tears dripping on the page. Forgiveness was not a door I had chosen to unlock, but the key rattled faintly now in my pocket, promising at least the possibility. And in that moment, as city lights glowed against the night and the murmur of fans already began to fill the streets for the next season, I realized something vital. Justice is not about erasing the past. It's about choosing what and who you carry into the future. This time, I wasn't carrying them. 18 months after the night my world shattered at the bottom of my parents' staircase, I stood at the edge of an arena floor, not as a player, but as Coach Elise Parker, assistant player development coach for the Phoenix Flames. The hardwood gleamed under the lights, sneakers squeaked as rookies ran drills, and the air hummed with the familiar rhythm of bouncing basketballs. That sound had been the soundtrack to my life since I was a kid shooting alone on cracked pavement in a storm. Standing there, spine still aching some days, scar tissue protesting every step, I couldn't help but marvel at the strange, jagged path that had brought me here. This was not the dream I had imagined when I first signed that $6 million contract. Back then, I pictured myself in uniform, jersey clinging to sweat, hitting buzzer-beating shots to screaming fans. Instead, I now limped slightly as I walked the sideline, clipboard in hand, demonstrating moves with careful precision, teaching younger players how to shift weight, create space, anticipate defenses. But here's the thing. For the first time, I felt at peace. This version of the dream was not lesser. It was different. It was built not on my family's neglect or resentment, but on my own resilience. The trial had ended. Justice delivered in cold sentences of years and restitution. That chapter was closed, though its scars would always remain etched in me. I hadn't spoken to my parents since their sentencing. I didn't plan to. Veronica was serving her time, silent letters from prison occasionally arriving but always unopened. But Caleb, he was different. We met months after he testified in a small coffee shop tucked away off Benefit Street in Providence. The meeting had been arranged cautiously through Daniel, who made me promise I could walk away the second it felt wrong. When I entered, Caleb looked smaller than I remembered. No bravado, no indulgent smirk. Just a man in his 20s who looked wrung out, like he'd aged 10 years in a year and a half. When he saw me, he stood too fast, nearly spilling his drink, guilt etched across his face. "Elise," he whispered. For minutes, we just sat. The steam from our cups, the only thing between us. Finally, I asked, "Why didn't you say something that night?" His hands curled around his cup as if he might shatter it. Fear. Always fear. I was raised to believe siding against them was suicide. Veronica controlled everything. Dad controlled her. Mom pretended it was all fine. I just went along because it was easier, until it wasn't. His voice cracked. "But that doesn't excuse me. I saw what they did to you, and I didn't move. That silence will haunt me forever." The rawness in his words burrowed into me. Pain surged fresh, but so did something else. The faint stirrings of empathy. Caleb had been their golden boy, yes, but also their pawn, molded into passivity by years under the same roof of hierarchy and cruelty. "I don't forgive you," I said quietly. His shoulders slumped. Then I added, "But maybe I can start." Tears rimmed his eyes as he nodded. That was the beginning, not of reconciliation in full, but of something tentative, fragile. Over months, we exchanged letters, then occasional calls. Slowly, he showed me his work, the therapy sessions, distance from our parents, the painful peeling away of lies he'd grown up believing. Forgiveness was a road, not a destination, but at least it wasn't blocked anymore. Through it all, Daniel was my unshakable anchor. He had been there in the hospital, pacing through sleepless nights, building my case line by line. He moved to Phoenix when I accepted the coaching role, laying roots with me in a new city where I could breathe without history choking me. His proposal 6 months ago, quiet and tender on the balcony overlooking the skyline, wasn't a surprise. But it was the fulfillment of something I had barely believed possible at one time. Being chosen, fully, without conditions. I said yes, before the words even finished leaving his mouth. Coach Miranda, too, remained a constant. She walked me through the transition from player to coach, her voice reminding me every day that leadership is forged not from trophies, but from scars. "Your story," she said one evening as practice wrapped, "is what makes these rookies trust you. They know you've bled, stumbled, gotten back up. You don't just coach them, you show them how to carry pain and turn it into fire." And she was right. Because standing there on those courts, guiding young talent, I realized my legacy wasn't buzzer beaters or interviews or contracts. It was what I gave back, what I left behind in them. That sense of clarity crystallized the night of my first official game as coach. The arena roared, lights blazed, and cameras panned across the floor. Players warmed up, fans held posters with my name on them, not demanding shots, but cheering for my survival, my return in this new role. When my name flashed on the screen, assistant player development coach Elise Parker, the crowd erupted. Not pity, not scandal, just respect. Later, in the locker room, one of the rookies pulled me aside, the ball clutched nervously under her arm. "Coach, can you show me one more time? That move where you fake right but pivot left?" I smiled, taking the ball, muscles trembling but spirit fierce. I shifted, demonstrated, not as fast, not as sharp as I once had, but still with the rhythm that lived in me. The rookie's eyes lit up as she tried, clumsy and eager, repeating until she got it right. In her face, I saw myself, 16 years old, practicing in the rain, no one in the stands, no family waiting at home. Alone. But not anymore. Now, I was the one giving what I had always needed, and that felt better than any crowd's cheer. That night, sitting with Daniel on our balcony, the city stretched out beneath us, I finally allowed myself to breathe fully. "I think," I said, slowly, "I'm at peace. Not because it stopped hurting, but because I built something else, something stronger. A family of choice, not accident. A future of my design, not theirs." He squeezed my hand, his eyes soft in the city glow. "That's because you didn't just survive, Elise. You transcended. They thought they could end you at the bottom of those stairs. But all they did was show the world what you're made of." I looked out over Phoenix. The lights, the life, the roar of the arena faint in the distance, and realized he was right, because betrayal may have broken me once, but resilience rebuilt me forever. And to anyone listening, if there's one thing I want my story to do, it's to remind you of this. Family is not always blood. Family is the people who stand by you when the world crumbles, the people who see your worth without you needing to prove it, the people who choose you every single day. If my journey resonated with you, if you have ever walked through betrayal and found yourself building strength from ashes, I want to hear your story too. Share it, because your survival might be the light someone else needs in their darkest night. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with anyone who needs to be reminded that healing is possible. Love is chosen, and the future is yours to reclaim. Because the family you build, the one you choose, can be stronger than the family you were born into, and in that truth, there is freedom.